Hello, this is Derek Kwan here, Executive Director at your Lincoln Center of Kansas, and I am so happy right now to be joined by the trumpet extraordinaire from the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis, and he is also the featured trumpet with all of the Sesame Foundation projects and activities and programs. And so you probably will recognize his trumpet playing on many, many different things on TV and recordings. Welcome to Kenny Rampton. Kenny, what's up, man?
What's happening, Derek? Thank you for having me, man. It's great to see you. I miss you at Jazz Lincoln Center, man.
Oh, man. No, man. Man, I miss you. I miss you guys. I miss you so much, man. And it's so good to see you healthy and safe in New York right now.
Yeah.
It must be, man, these last 3.5, 4 months have probably been so intense, man. And, you know, I appreciate you. I really appreciate you taking the time to connect with us. So we've got a bunch of different topics to cover because you're such a busy guy. But I'd like to start out with first the project that you played such a great role in, and that was a project that the Lincoln Center of Kansas and KU commissioned the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis to compose and perform a new suite honoring 15 KU basketball luminaries. And Kenny, man, your movement passing game is just phenomenal. And I just want to thank you so much for your contribution to that project.
Oh, thank you, man. It was my pleasure, man. That was a lot of fun to do. I'm a huge basketball fan, first of all. I've always been into basketball. I went to UNLV in Las Vegas my first few years of college back in the Tarkanian days. So, you know, I've always loved the sport and the game of basketball. So I understand the game to a certain degree. So to write a piece about such a phenomenal player was pretty cool for me. Yeah, Bill
Hoagland. I mean, you know, you acknowledged this actually the night of the show when you were introducing Mr. Hoagland's movement. That there were, I think, you know, over 10 members of his family in the audience.
I'd like to acknowledge and recognize Mr. Hoagland's family. I understand we have 18 family members here tonight, so please give it up for them.
That was very kind of you to acknowledge them in the audience. And, you know, your concept behind the movement is really, really, really cool. So do you mind sharing a little bit about how you built the framework of the movement itself?
Not at all. I actually enjoyed sharing it. I've actually, somebody reached out to me not too long ago who loved the record and loved that movement and wanted to talk to me about my concept of composing that movement. And it's actually kind of fun to talk about. I really, you know, and I don't get to share it with too many people. So I'm happy to, you know, take you through my process, man. If you hear thunder out the window, it's storming here in New York.
Oh, got it.
So there was just a huge explosion of thunder a minute ago. I don't know if you heard it, but
a little bit.
It goes again. Yeah. But anyways, you know, Mr. Hoagland was, you know, such an amazing player. And it was in 1952 that he led the Jayhawks to the national championship as their point guard. And I believe it was that same year, as the first year, he led the U.S. Olympic team to the gold medal as the team captain and point guard. And, you know, anybody knows basketball knows that the point guard is the orchestrator for the team, you know, and it's all about the team. And a big part of any point guard's game is passing, you know, and feeding the ball to the other players, and plays like the most common, most, you know, known play in basketball is probably the pick and roll. You know, so I wanted to incorporate all this stuff into the piece. So I didn't know too much about Mr. Hoagland when I first started. And so I researched him. I read about him. I watched what little video footage there was of him for inspiration. So I could know about him. I actually watched a speech he gave, and he spoke with a certain rhythm like a basketball player or a jazz musician would. Jazz and basketball have a lot in common, you know, and so it kind of gave me some insight into who he was. You know, he became a great business leader later on in life, as you know, and so he was truly a team leader, you know, and that's really what he was about. And so I call the game the movement passing game because that's part of what he did, and as a team leader. So if you check out the score of the piece, throughout the entire piece, there are teams of 5 players playing at a time.
Right.
Well, first thing I did is I wrote the melody based on getting inspired by him, and you could turn it into a lead sheet, you know, and play it in a quintet gig or something. but the concept behind the piece was really about the team, the orchestra in this case, you know, and everybody playing it together. So the melody, if I play it by myself, is all right. So that's the full melody that I wrote, you know, based on what I learned about him and the rhythm and the feeling I got from him. You know, I just got inspired by him, and that's what came out of me.
Beautiful.
So I wrote that melody, but I wanted to really write it in a way so it incorporated the full team. So I wanted to use the whole big band, but not all at the same time. So going with the theme of plays in basketball and the pick and roll, which always involves a smaller player and a larger player. So it'll be like a forward and a guard. You know, I wrote the piece, that melody in octaves. So it was an upper octave representing, you know, a guard or a point guard, and a lower octave representing, you know, a big man.
Yes.
You know? And so it's always in octaves, and it passes from one phrase to the next, passes to different groups of two players representing the two players in the pick and roll. All right?
I love it.
So it goes through the entire band like that, whether it's trumpet and trombone or alto and tenor or alto and baritone or whatever the groupings were, is going from phrase to phrase with different people playing it, passing the phrase back and forth throughout the entire band to create one large phrase. So that's how it started. So it was 5 people playing at a time as well. There's 2 people playing the melody and 3 people in the rhythm section, piano, bass, and drums. So
right.
It's always 5 people playing, you know, like a basketball team. 5
exactly,
people.
Yeah.
So that's how I created the body of the tune, the beginning of the first chorus of it. Now, in further researching the time, I was curious if Mr. Hoagland was a jazz fan or not. I really didn't know. I didn't have a chance to interview anybody in the family to ask, but I just tried to imagine in my head that maybe he was.
Yeah.
And so I researched what was the music, what was the popular jazz music at that time. And I researched one of my favorite, actually probably my very favorite jazz musician of all time, Miles Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And Miles had a record come out that same year, 1952, called Dig.
Yeah.
And in further researching what was going on in that year in basketball and whatnot, I also noticed that the Harlem Globetrotters adopted Sweet Georgia Brown as their theme song in 1952, the same year. And
beautiful.
Miles Davis's song "Dig" is based on Sweet Georgia Brown.
Yeah, the changes, right?
Yeah, the chord changes, the structure of the song. It's the same chord changes, which is a 32-bar song structure. And it's not AABA like most jazz songs. It's actually A first ending, A second ending.
Got it.
And coincidentally, the melody that I wrote for Mr. Hoagland was the same form in terms of A first ending, A second ending. And it was also in a relative key. It wasn't the same key. Sweet Georgia Brown ends up in A flat major, but this started off in the relative minor.
Got it.
So it could actually be superimposed over the top of this tune. They're actually very related, these two melodies. And all this stuff in 1952, I just thought it was very interesting. So when we went into the next section of the song, which is the solo section,
yes,
where there's improvisation, we actually went to the form of Sweet Georgia Brown and Dig, the same form for the solo section. Okay, so that sets up the next body, big part of the tune. So the solo section, I kept to the theme of having 2 horn players in different octaves, improvising with the rhythm section. So it's 5 players playing at a time still. Yes. But this time I had us improvising, myself and Victor Goines, trading with Ted Nash and Elliot Mason. So we've got a high horn and a low horn playing together, improvising together for 4 bars, and then passing again. I was passing to Ted Nash, and Victor was passing to Elliot Mason. So we're actually improvising vertically and horizontally at the same time for a couple choruses. So that was a concept behind the improvisation. And improvisation had to be part of it because it's such an important part of the game of basketball.
Yes.
Improvisation, so then after that section, I love talking about this. Sorry, man.
No, this is great, man.
But it's really fun to me. The next section, I kept the form of Sweet Georgia Brown and Dig, and I took the melody that I originally wrote for Mr. Hoagland, and I superimposed that melody over the song structure of Sweet Georgia Brown and Dig. And this time I featured a different team of 5. I featured the 5 saxophones.
Right.
All right. So they played a sax solely. So I had the rhythm section break, and the saxophones came in with the melody. But I had to make some changes in the melody so it fit over the song or the form of Sweet Georgia Brown or Dig. So I made some tweaks in it and changed it up. And then I voiced it for 5 saxes representing the 5 on the court for the saxophone solely. But I made it a tight voicing. And that represents the basketball court and the form that you got to stay in. You can't go out of bounds. So that means it's a tight voicing all within 1 octave, the entire thing, the entire saxophone solely. So the lead alto and the baritone are in octave unison, and the other 3 voices in between them are tight voicings playing the chord tones or rubs against each other to create different effects within that. So that represents the basketball court and finding freedom within confinement, if you will.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You can't go out of bounds when you're playing basketball. So halfway through that, I brought in the brass section to play some defense against the saxophone section. So there's a little bit of call and response that represent offense and defense.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the soli, I had to do this. I had to throw a little bit of the Kansas City Jayhawks fight song.
Yeah.
So if you check out the very end of the soli, the whole band plays together, which is the end of the Jayhawks fight song, right?
Yeah.
And so after that, we called a little timeout, and we gave the drummer some.
Charles Gould.
Gave him a little bit of her timeout before we went into the final chorus, the 4th quarter, if you will. First quarter is the first melody. Second quarter is improvisation. Third quarter was the shout chorus and saxophone solely. Timeout going into the 4th quarter. So the drum solo, and then 4th quarter is a recapitulation of the top with back to the original melody, the original song form, with trading the melodies, but doing it in shorter spurts until the very end, where the whole band plays together at the very end instead of trading back and forth, just to build into the climax of it. And then we all ended in unison on 1 note and on the root in unison to represent a couple of things. Number 1 is the final whistle, and we're all in unison on the root or the 1 note of the 1 chord to represent Kansas City Jayhawks, number 1.
Yeah, number 1 team. Number 1 team in the country. That's right, man. Yeah, KU Jayhawks, man. That's beautiful, man. And so, that was a fantastic explanation, summary of your approach to the movement. And man, it adds so much wonderful depth and context to how it sounds. And what I appreciate about that movement too is it's just completely swinging. And it's joyful. It's so joyful, and it's uplifting. So happy. It's so happy,
Thank you. I mean, that's a reflection of the inspiration for it. Of Mr. Bill Hoagland. I wish I had known him. He was clearly a leader and a very influential person to everybody who was lucky enough to know him and work with him.
Yeah, man.
Basketball or anything else,
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for that contribution. And I understand your son is a big basketball guy too. Is that right?
He is. He's 14.
Beautiful.
He's a starting center on his basketball team.
He's the big man. The big man.
He is. He's really serious about it.
Cool, man. So in addition to Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, you also, as I mentioned earlier, you are part of the Sesame Street family as well, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And how many years have you been doing that?
About 10 years now.
About 10 years. That's beautiful, man.
Yeah, I joined the same year that I joined the JLCO.
That's amazing. And you've also had a ton of, I mean, you've played all different kinds of shows throughout your career as well, right?
Yeah, I've played quite a few Broadway shows. The last one was Anything Goes on Broadway with Sutton Foster and Joel Gray.
Yeah.
And, I've done quite a bit of Broadway in my career.
Yeah, and it's really obviously so challenging right now for so many different arts organizations and especially the Broadway industry. So, but you've been able to diversify so much, playing in the JLCO, playing with Sesame Street, and not only that, you have made incredible strides in the field of jazz education as well. So do you mind if I ask you a couple questions about an initiative that you started in, I believe, your hometown of Las Vegas, Nevada?
I'd be honored. Thank you for bringing that up, man.
No, man, this is beautiful because, education, arts education is just so important to the world, especially right now in times of quarantine, in times of challenge and strife. And tell me a little bit about your philosophy behind founding and now running and being the artistic director of the Jazz Outreach Initiative, JOI, right?
Joy, we call it.
Joy, yes. I love it.
Thanks, man. Well, it's a long story. I don't want to bore you with the long story of how it all came to be, but education has always been important to my family. My mother, Renee Rampton, she's always fought for music education. She was a school teacher. She taught first grade and third grade. Before that, when I was a child growing up, when I was in elementary school, in fact, growing up in Las Vegas, the school district wanted to take the music curriculum out of elementary schools.
Oh, wow.
And my mom fought them on it and won.
Nice.
And she's always been a big advocate for music education. It's always been important to her. When she was teaching first and third grade, she had a piano in the classroom, and she engaged the kids through music. She wasn't a music teacher. She was a general education teacher, but she always has used music. She was a piano teacher for as long as I remember. She was my first music teacher, in fact. She taught me how to read music, and, my father was also a musician. He was the leading percussionist in Las Vegas. If you ever watched the Jerry Lewis Telethon back in the day when Ed Hirschman would say timpani roll, that was my dad doing the timpani roll.
Wow.
The entire run of the telethon.
That's amazing.
He was cool. He passed away very young, but he toured with Elvis Presley. He worked with Sinatra, with all the Rat Pack guys, and was a top call guy in Las Vegas. And he had a percussion group called Planet Percussion, where they had a music outreach program when I was a child, part of a program called Young Audiences. And they would bring groups to elementary schools to teach the kids about music. And my dad was very involved with that, with his percussion group, Planet Percussion, and they play like the theme from 2001 or whatever.
Nice.
Things that the kids could recognize.
Sure.
And so my family was always very involved in music education, and so I'd never been too interested in it, to be honest, myself. Most of my career I spent time touring with Ray Charles or Illinois Jacquet or Lionel Hampton or Jimmy McGriff, the Mingus Big Band for almost 20 years. Didn't really get too involved in education until I got the gig with Wynton, with Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. And that's just part of the deal. Everybody in the orchestra is an educator and works with kids and a lot of outreach. You don't have to do it, but they encourage everybody to do it. So when I first got with the band, I said, man, please team me up with Victor Goins or with Ted Nash or, guys who were really great educators so I could follow their lead and kind of see how they do things before I went out on my own. And then I started doing it on my own and found that I'm kind of a natural at it. It's
in your blood. It's in your blood, man.
Yeah. And I really found that I have a passion for it that I didn't even know. And my mom always comes to Essentially Ellington. In fact, I'm wearing a shirt now, if you see.
Beautiful.
She always comes to Essentially Ellington in New York because she just loves it. She loves the kids. She loves that music from that era, reminds her of her childhood. She loves education. And one year she asked me, why isn't there ever a band from Las Vegas here in New York for Essentially Ellington? That's a good question. So to make a long story short, we were on tour with Wynton, and we did a gig in Vegas, and I invited band directors I knew with their students. About 250 kids showed up, and nice. I told them all about Essentially Ellington. I encouraged them all to sign up for it. And I said, any bands that sign up, download the music, I'll come. the next time I'm in town to visit my mom, I'll come and work with your program. I'll just give you a free workshop. And so
Nice.
the next time I came to town, I did like 10 free workshops in 4 days. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it turns out like 18 bands signed up for essentially Ellington in a short period. And I was talking to Todd Stoll and saying maybe one of them will make it to New York for EE. He said, no, man, you got enough to start your own regional version of essentially Ellington. It's like, wow, I never thought of that. And so one thing led to another, and we decided with the help of Dave Loeb, who is the director of jazz education at UNLV, he offered to have the festival at the university, and we put our heads together and said, how do we make this happen? So in order to make the Essentially Ellington Festival happen at UNLV in Las Vegas, to bring the regional festival there,
right?
I decided to create a nonprofit organization to have in place in case we needed it. And coincidentally, at the same time, a woman who was executive director of a program I went through in high school called Nevada School of the Arts approached me and my partner, Gary Cordell, and said, can you help us create a jazz studies program at NSA, Nevada School of the Arts, which I studied there, but it was all classical music.
Yes.
And so we actually started both those things at the same time under the leadership of our new nonprofit organization, Jazz Outreach Initiative.
I love it.
We just created. So now we've got this organization in place. We got our 501c3 approval. We're working and putting all the ducks in the row to bring essentially Ellington. We've started a jazz studies program at Nevada School of the Arts, which we oversaw for the first year, and then let them take over, and we stepped away from that because we got other things we want to do. And since then, with Joy, we've now had, in February, we had our 3rd annual Essentially Ellington Regional Festival in Las Vegas. It's the largest in the country. We had 28 bands, I think.
Wow.
At the last festival. I mean, it was crazy. We had to do it over 2 days.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. It's taken on a life of its own. We've got outreach programs. We focus on underprivileged, at-risk schools. We've licensed jazz for young people from Jazz Lincoln Center. Last year was about Thelonious Monk. This year was about Miles Davis. Unfortunately, everything is canceled now due to COVID.
Right.
But another dream of ours with Joy was to create a Las Vegas Youth Jazz Orchestra.
Uh-huh.
And we've wanted to do that from the beginning, and we finally found the right partner to help us do that, that has a facility, because we don't actually have a building or an office. We just
got it.
And we partnered with the Las Vegas Youth Orchestras, which has been there for 40 years, and they wanted a jazz division. So we created a Las Vegas Youth Jazz Orchestra. We had 6 rehearsals with them, and then COVID hit.
Got it.
So we still, we've been able to engage the kids still and move forward and do recordings with the kids. We've set up Zoom roundtable discussions with guests and done Q&As with people like Charles McPherson and
nice.
Vincent Gardner and Scotty Barnhart, band leader from the Count Basie Orchestra. Marcus Printup, and quite a few others. So we're still, even though we're in COVID, we're finding ways to engage with the students and keep them involved and try and generate excitement about the music and about jazz education. Because I feel, specifically jazz education, not, music education, of course, in general, but specifically jazz education, I feel can really be a great tool to unite people. And I think it's all about unity. It's all about empathy. It's all about democracy and diplomacy. And I think people who, if we can really get through to people, I think it can be incredible in terms of healing the community. And I think it can be very helpful in many, many ways. And I think it's crucial to keep things going and keep creating online content while we're going through this. So rather than, whining and pouting because all of our concerts got canceled and everything else, and it's sad, but, we're using this time to create online content, to stay engaged with the students, to get them recording and doing things that they otherwise wouldn't have gotten to do, to get them to meet people like Charles McPherson, who they wouldn't have otherwise got to meet probably, even though it was online.
Yeah.
So we're actually creating new opportunities that wouldn't have been there otherwise, and really trying to find a silver lining in this
That's
cloud.
beautiful.
You know, and so I can talk forever about joy and what we're doing. It's really become a very, very deep passion for me. And, you know, I say a prayer every day, saying, thank you, Jazz and Lincoln Center, for affording me the opportunity to be able to create this that is affecting a lot of kids' lives in a positive way. Because that's what's happened. Jazz and Lincoln Center and the opportunities that I've had through playing with the band, with Wynton, and my exposure to education, and it's really bringing out my love for education and affording me the opportunity to be able to do things like this is really a blessing, man.
Man, kudos to you for looking at things as glasses half full, because, you know, in this time of physical distancing where we kind of were forced to be apart, I don't think there's anything better than the performing arts and jazz. You know, jazz fits into that to create a sense of social connection.
Yeah.
You know, music is incredible in its ability to create that sense of social connection, even though you and I right now are, you know, 1,500, 2,000 miles away from each other. So, yeah, kudos to you.
No, we're not, man. You're right here on my kitchen table. What are you talking about?
Hey, man. So we're going to include links about joy, you know, when we post this. Okay.
Thank you so much.
And so if folks that are watching didn't realize that Kenny is, you know, not busy enough, he also is an inventor, entrepreneur, spokesperson, and he's actually recently, very, very recently, just launched a new line of plunger mutes. So this is for you trumpet players out there. Check this out, man. He launched a new line of mutes, plunger mutes, with Hirschman, right? With Hirschman?
Ed Hirschman, yeah.
Ed Hirschman. And it's the KR Indigo Plunger Mute. So KR obviously stands for Kenny Rampton. And you want to give me a little background on the Indigo? Why Indigo?
Well, one of my features with Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra is Mood Indigo.
Yep.
And also, two of my biggest inspirations as plunger players, trumpet players who were masters of the plunger, are Clark Terry and the great lead player for the Count Basie Orchestra for many years, Snooky Young.
Yeah.
And they both played blue plungers.
Nice.
And so, you know, Indigo.
Yeah, I like it.
You know,
I like
so that's why we called it the Indigo, KR Indigo.
Beautiful, man. Well, congratulations, because I know the Max version you said has sold out at this point.
Yep. I've got one here. If you look closely, it says Max on it.
Yeah.
I have one of the other ones too here. This is the standard size. So you can see the Max is bigger. I don't know if you want to get into all that went into the designing of this plunger. It was a long process. But it's been a lot of fun. And basically, I actually did it for Wynton because I'd given Wynton a plunger years ago. And as you know, if you have something made of rubber, as it gets older, the rubber gets hard and cracked.
Yeah, right.
And Wynton's had cracked and it wasn't usable anymore. And he asked me if I had another one of this size, and I didn't. And I checked at least a dozen hardware stores probably, and couldn't find one. And so I found the name of the company. It turns out they're not making them anymore.
Oh.
And so I talked to a buddy of mine, Ed Hirschman, who I've known since high school. Ed and I played in the McDonald's All-American Jazz Band together in high school.
Nice.
And we've been friends all these years. And I talked to him about it. Ed's like, well, let's just make one. Like, how do you do that? Ed's an engineer. He still plays the trumpet. He's still a fine trumpet player, but, you know, he went to school, got a degree in engineering, and has a career, you know, in engineering. So he's got a mind like that and the software to be able to do it on a computer. So he took Wynton's plunger. I asked Wynton if I could have it so I could send it to him. So he took it and he scanned it, and then he designed it. We made some tweaks to the top of it, so it's a handle. We put this device in. We call it, it's got a penny here, and it's got a penny on the inside. You turn the penny on the inside with the one on the outside. It's like a little handle. It's a butterfly valve.
Nice.
And Ed started calling it the Kenny penny. But you close it or open it to change the sound coming out when you play tight closed plunger.
Yep.
So we created that for it. We created this handle, and we made it a little bit larger so it would be in tune when you play it with the trumpet. Because every plunger, when you play tight plunger, is sharp. This one isn't. It's actually in tune from the bottom to the top of the horn. So when you play tight plunger, you don't have to lip every other note because you're in where your chops out
to get it to be in tune.
Yeah.
Man, no wonder it's sold out immediately. I mean,
it's designed for that, and that's never been done before. People traditionally, trumpet players have gone into hardware stores and actually bought toilet plungers and said, "Keep the stick," to the guy behind the desk, and go out, and then you get a plunger, then you got to cut a hole in it, then you got to put a coin in there, and no two are quite the same, and to get a balance and a blend in a section is always tricky when playing with plungers. And nobody had really designed one with the intent of it playing in tune and being used as a musical instrument, and to me, intent matters.
Definitely.
This has the intention to make music, not to unstuff your toilet or your sink, so intention matters. So we made this. Now the Count Basie Orchestra trumpet section is endorsing this.
Nice.
And as well as quite a few trumpet players around the country and around the world. I got a video last week, I think, from Arturo Sandoval.
Yeah, I think I saw you posted that on your page.
Yeah,
man.
He said it's the best plunger I ever played. I got a video the other day, I think it's posted today or tomorrow, from Randy Brecker.
Oh, nice.
John Faddis just asked me for one. Wynton's got one. And really, some of the very best, not some of, like many of the very best trumpet players around the world are responding very positively to this. And I think it looks cool, too. I like the color.
Oh, yeah, man.
Also, we made it out of silicone instead of rubber because it lasts longer. It's not going to get hard and crack. It's going to last longer. Plus, the silicone's got like a shine to it that looks kind of cool. So there you go. That's what's behind the plunger.
Man, I love it.
It's fun.
So we've covered everything from the pick and roll to toilet plungers today, which is fantastic.
And in record time.
What's that?
And in record time.
In record time, yeah. So to close this awesome interview out, man, thank you so much again. But
my pleasure.
Let me ask you just one last question. What are you missing the most right now during these last 3.5, 4 months? What is something that you're truly missing?
My son.
Got it.
My son Darren, who we talked about a little bit, is a
basketball player.
He's my heart, man, and he lives with his mother in Ankara, Turkey.
Oh, in Turkey, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And it's hard enough that I don't get to see him very often. We see each other, 3 times a year or so, and he was supposed to come in April during, I guess, his spring break.
I see.
And that got canceled, and then usually we spend the entire summer together. Last summer he came on tour with me.
Nice.
And we were planning on a big family trip with him and my sister and nieces, and in fact both of my sisters, to Disney World this summer, and all that's canceled or postponed.
Right.
But right now he would be with me, and we'd be hanging out every day, shooting baskets and just being together. And we always go to Vegas together.
Yeah.
To see my family, and so honestly, that's what I'm missing the most is being with my son and being able to give him a hug. Yeah,
man, that's priceless, man. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And maybe one day, if you already haven't done it, maybe you might give him your Jayhawk jersey, maybe.
I've already planned on that. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna wait till he's older, though. He's not ready for it yet.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, man. So, once again, thank you so much. We actually have a date on the books right now with you in the JLCO in mid-October. But as we know, things are it's just so fluid right now. But I just want you to know that you and the entire band are welcome here in Lawrence anytime. You guys are part of the family now. You're part of the Lawrence mythology. Because of your work on Rock Chalk Suite. So we appreciate you so much. And it's great to hear all the incredible things you're doing and staying productive during this time when a lot of folks, might just throw the towel in. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man.
So kudos to you.
Thank you for having me, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here. If I can just say one more quick thing about that, what you just said. I remember Wynton one time giving a great master class to an auditorium filled with probably 2,000 kids, and talking about the importance of being aware that in every situation we're in, there's a positive side to it and a negative side to it. And it's important to be aware of the negative, but to truly focus on the positive. And, you know, this is a lesson that I teach all my students with Joy and everybody else, that, you know, life is about the journey, not the destination. Yeah. You know, and concerts are canceled or whatever, that's the destination. Don't worry about that. There will be new destinations, but the journey never ends. No matter what the circumstances are, focus on the positive, focus on learning and growing and positive energy and being a part of something bigger than yourself, and you're going to get through it just fine and come out the other side of the difficult time we're going through much stronger as a result.
Man, Kenny, beautiful words, and couldn't have asked for anything more, man. So it's very uplifting. So, man, you stay safe, man. Stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you sooner than later in person. Okay.
Yes, sir. All right, all my best to you, man.
All right, man.
Big hug, man.
Take care, brother.